Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 112 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Whether you're watching live on Facebook, watching archived on YouTube, listening on SoundCloud or Apple Podcast, wherever and however you consume the Tech Sideline Podcast, we are so glad that you could join us today on Monday morning, January 27th. We've got a lot to discuss today here on the Tech Sideline Podcast. We'll be talking about the transfer portal, some news in the last week with 5 Virginia Tech players entering their names into the transfer portal. We'll talk a little bit about the decision of Damon Hazelton to move on from Virginia Tech to Missouri. Plus, we'll talk a little bit about Virginia Tech hoops. Last week started on a high, the double overtime win against North Carolina, but Saturday the Hokies fall in Chestnut Hill to Boston College. What does that all mean for Virginia Tech's NCAA tournament chances? We'll talk to Will and Chris about that. And towards the end of the podcast, we invite you now to drop your questions below on Facebook Live. Our best producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart, will take them down and get to those towards the end of the show. Again, Malcolm's behind the scenes on the podcast set. We've got our managing editor at Tech Sideline, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, and I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. Again, we're happy to have you with us here on the Tech Sideline Podcast on Monday, January 27th.
Episode number 112.
112.
I meant to say last episode was the vertical episode, 111.
It's a good way to think about it.
1,000 episodes from now, we'll have another vertical episode.
I can't wait for 222.
Yeah. That is 500 weeks. It's like 9 years.
We'll get there. Maybe we'll be going to 3 or 4 shows a week by, a couple of weeks, and we'll get there sooner than later. Reminder that the Fisher Law Firm is Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. From their office in Blacksburg, they are able to serve the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. Whether you are charged with driving under the influence or speeding, the Fisher Law Firm realizes that each case is important to the client. To date, the firm has defended more than 30,000 people charged with a moving violation. For a free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll free at 1-800-680-7031. That number again, 1-800-680-7031. Or you can email them at info@fisherlegal.com. Again, that's the Fisher Law Firm, proud sponsor of the Tech Sideline Podcast. All right, guys, good morning. January 27th. Let's think about this. It's almost February. It is still really cold outside, and we are in the midst of a busy time here at Tech Sideline.
It's actually not really cold outside. It's supposed to be in the 40s all through like February 10th.
That's still pretty cold, though, right?
Not for here this time.
It's going to be in the 50s.
Consider yourself
I need
fortunate.
60s, guys. Come on.
I don't
No, you're right. It could be a
that.
lot worse.
Yeah,
a lot worse.
Yep. It's been
and knock on wood, no snow yet in Blacksburg.
That's right.
Well, we got 6 more weeks. I'm sure it'll find a way to fit itself in there.
And I'm sure somehow it'll start snowing like mid-March when we're all we'll have a little bit of spring, and then the snow will come randomly.
Be good for a March blizzard.
Yeah.
So let me mention we also have young Nick Brown observing again today, taking it all in, honing his craft. The first part is to just watch and learn.
Yeah, he's wearing his Capital sweatshirt today. Not a bad choice. Right. Stanley Cup champions just a couple of years ago. Great to have Nick with us. As we said, a lot to get to today. We're going to be talking a lot about Virginia Tech football. The transfer portal will crunch some excellent numbers. I think it's going to lead to a really great discussion about the transfer portal as a whole in college football, and really look forward to getting that conversation. But we are going to open up the podcast today with some tragic news, and news that is really taken over the world of sports and really the world as a whole, and that is that icon and former NBA player Kobe Bryant tragically passed away on Sunday, as well as his 13-year-old daughter. There were 9 passengers on board of a helicopter, and just felt like this was too big of news not to open up with, because of what Kobe Bryant leaves behind in the world of sports, really. And he meant a lot to a younger generation, and that was talked about on Tech Talk Live last night with Laser talking to Isaiah Wilkins and Mike Young. And in a lot of ways, the kids in college right now, the younger generation, they didn't grow up with Jordan. They grew up with Kobe and idolizing Kobe. And I think you see that a little bit in the NBA today. So, Will, I just wanted to start with you not just about the basketball, but just this unthinkable tragedy, and for the just how devastating that this is for a family to have lost a father and a daughter, and for all the families affected. It truly a travesty yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, being the father of 3 kids, Kobe was 41. That's too young. It was funny. I saw somebody on the television say yesterday, 41 is I don't know if they use the word old. It's old for an athlete, but for a person, it's young. It's way young, and he was getting ready to start the second phase of his career, which was, off the court. But the thought of one of his kids being with him, I haven't thought this through, and I don't quite know how to put it, but as a father, as a parent, really, your mindset is me, not the kids. And so that's one of the worst parts of it. Everybody hates to lose Kobe, but his daughter was 13. She wasn't even really started yet on life. And I don't want to imagine what it's like to go down in a helicopter. It's bad all the way around. For me personally, I watched the NBA in 70s and early to late 80s. So Kobe came along at a time when I wasn't paying any attention to the NBA. But yeah, I know who he is. I know what he's done. One of the leading scorers in NBA history, right?
So LeBron actually passed Kobe on Saturday night for the third all-time leading scorer in NBA history, and that was the last tweet that Kobe put out.
Kobe's last tweet is congratulating LeBron.
And he did it in Philly, which is where Kobe grew up.
Yeah. So my wife sat and watched all the coverage yesterday, and she said that I don't know anything about him, but he seems like he was a really good guy and a good father. Yep.
Yeah. It was really shown. So his daughter, Gigi, as they called her, was really turning into a really special basketball player, and you could tell that Kobe was enjoying that second part of his life where he was a father on the floor and teaching his kids about the game. And Chris, just your thoughts about this tragic day and what Kobe Bryant leaves behind.
Yeah, I remember when he was drafted, and Moses Malone was a guy back in the day who went straight from high school to the NBA. Right?
Yeah, Moses did. College, but he was pretty much the only one.
He was pretty much the only one until Kobe did it. And I remember there were two guys in that draft class. It was Kobe and Jermaine O'Neal, who went straight from high school to the NBA. Jermaine O'Neal had a good career, but Kobe obviously had an elite career. And Kobe wasn't taken number one overall. He was taken 12th, 15th, something like that, I believe. 6th? 14th. I'm sorry. Can't read.
Great find there from Nick.
Good call. And I don't know if that was because they didn't really view him as an elite prospect, or if it was because they were just scared to take a high school guy at that point. Obviously, they have not been scared to take high school guys since then, and I think he's obviously one of the guys that paved that path. I think if you want to compare it to anything, in some ways it compares to the Dale Earnhardt's death, which was huge for NASCAR. But at the same time, NASCAR is a very regionalized sport in southeastern United States. I don't think your average American grasps how global the basketball game has gotten. I was reading something yesterday about how the Philippines would basically shut down whenever Kobe Bryant was in town. He's that big a deal in the Philippines. Basketball is more like soccer in so much as it's globalization. So, this is a big deal, not just in the United States, but across the world. It's affected a lot of people everywhere.
Yeah.
So something I didn't know, I was a Sixers fan back in the 70s and 80s, and I follow Julius Erving on Twitter. He doesn't, Dr. J doesn't tweet much, but he tweeted something like, so sad for the loss of my teammate's son and granddaughter. And I didn't know that Kobe's dad was Joe Bryant, who played for the Sixers in the late 70s for about 3 or 4 years when Julius was there. And I thought that I would remember everything from my sporting youth, but no, I don't remember Joe Bryant at all. He was a backup post player. He'd I don't know, averaged 5 to 7 points a game or something like that. And I thought, wow, I don't remember him being on the Sixers, and I did not know that Kobe's dad played for the Sixers.
Yeah, and I think kind of a way to wrap this up, it's always fun kind of growing up thinking about, who's your top 5 NBA players of all time? Always kind of like a fun discussion growing up.
Yeah.
I think Kobe Bryant is for sure in that top 5 NBA players of all time. I think
He'd certainly be in the discussion.
Yeah.
I do remember his 81-point game against the Raptors, I believe.
Yep.
Man, it's insane. 81 points in one game.
Yeah,
it's crazy. I wrap it up with this. I think I don't know if you guys saw. I just want to close with this. There's a lot of raw reaction yesterday, obviously on on social media and television. And the one that really stuck with me, and I woke up this morning knowing that I was going to open up with this, was Jay Williams, who was on, very soon after the news. And he was really overcome with emotion and hit home. And this is just a really unfortunate reminder of just how precious life is and how it can be taken in a second, and that no grudge is bigger than life itself. So text your loved ones, hug your loved ones. It's an unfortunate reminder of that, just how lucky we are just to sit here today and do the Tech Sideline podcast. So sad news to open up the show, but I appreciate both of y'all's insight. And with that, let's kind of transition now into Virginia Tech football. Again, Will has done some incredible reporting here. 2 pages on the transfer portal across the landscape of college football over the last 2 years. We will get to that in a little bit and spend the majority of the podcast today talking about that. But let's begin with the news about the transfer portal and Virginia Tech. Within the last podcast that we did on Wednesday, 5 Virginia Tech players have announced their name into the transfer portal. That's wide receivers Hezekiah Grimsley, Phil Patterson, Jacoby Pinkney, safety Khalil Ladler, and running back Caleb Stewart. This goes along with the news of Deshaun McClease entering his name to the NFL draft, Dalton Keene entering his name to the NFL draft, and Damon Hazelton, who we talked about last week, announcing over the weekend that he is transferring to Missouri. Chris, when you heard about those 5 players in the transfer portal, what came to mind first, and were you surprised to see 5 more players put their name in the portal?
No, I was pretty much expecting all of those guys. I thought Jacoby Pinkney would hold out for a little while, but we heard his career wasn't going particularly well.
Yeah.
So no, I was expecting it. In fact, I think Will said on last Monday's podcast, he said the semester starts tomorrow, which means school's going to start, and then these guys are going to enter their name in the portal. They'll have those, so they keep their scholarships for the second semester, of course, while they look for a new school.
Yeah, and I actually said 5 players.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, because
you did say
we knew.
We knew it was coming. Not a surprise for me. I wish they hadn't announced a different time other than 15 minutes before a basketball game or whatever it was.
Yeah.
but yeah, it was not a surprise. So when it happened, I didn't form any new thoughts that I didn't already have.
Well, I think one of the names in those 5 that was surprising to a lot of people on social media and the message boards, and that was wide receiver Jacoby Pinkney, who had a big recruitment. It was pretty well documented. He was one of the.
He's a 4-star guy, right, Chris?
It was borderline, depending on who you ask. Right. His offer list was really, really good. Like his final 3 was Virginia Tech, Alabama, and Georgia. You never know what offers are committable these days and what aren't. Yeah. I thought he was a really, really good prospect. I still think he's a really, really good prospect physically.
Yeah.
I just don't think. Well, the insiders are saying that he showed up on campus and just did not quite understood what it took at the college level as far as work ethic goes. Like in high school, you're so much better than everybody else on the field physically, and in college you're not, unless you're some sort of a super freak athlete. Yeah. You really have to work at it from a technique standpoint and strength conditioning, and some guys they don't get that early in their career and they get left behind as a result, and that's what happened to him apparently.
And you see this in athletics, making the jump from one level to another, and not to embarrass my son, but when he was a kid and the coaches were doing the pitching, he was a pretty good baseball player, and then when the kids started pitching, he hit the wall.
Not Malcolm. I can't believe that.
Malcolm couldn't hit a curveball.
Malcolm, jump in here, man. Come on. Give us the rundown.
It wasn't that I couldn't hit. It was that I watched a classmate of mine get his ribs cracked by a pitch, and I was like, no. I'm done.
And so, that's just an example.
Sure.
Every level sloughs off some of the guys that just can't make the transition to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
A couple other names in there. Hezekiah Grimsley had a couple of really great moments for Virginia Tech. You think about Khalil Ladler, and the legacy he'll leave behind is one of the heroes in the North Carolina game this year and the 6 overtimes.
No doubt.
And he was someone who was a starter in 2018, got replaced in 2019, but served a big purpose on this team as a valuable backup player who could get on the field and, like he showed against North Carolina, make plays when needed to.
Yeah, he was important in that game. hope we don't need him in a game next year because he's not going to be here.
So
right?
here's another play you probably don't remember. Down at North Carolina in 2018, I don't remember that running back for them, but he got behind the defense and down the sideline, and Khalil Adler ran him down and tackled him at about the 10 or 20-yard line.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't the Reggie Floyd against Pitt tackle, game-saving tackle. I don't remember what happened after that.
But it was an important play for sure.
Yeah, and then I remember he was on the field in a reserve role for the final play against Pitt, right? When Tech had that goal line stand a couple of years ago.
I think he was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Tech had a bunch of guys hurt in the secondary towards the end of the season. Like Deion Newsome was starting.
Yeah.
You know, one again, as we look at the 5 players, right? Receiver.
Oh, by the way, let me jump in here and say I don't remember the exact details. I wrote up the article about these 5 players transferring, and those 5 guys, 3 of them, I think, started a handful of games. Well, more than a handful. Started some games in their careers, but none of these guys had started in any games in 2019.
Yeah, they all got
and
passed.
weren't projected to be starters in 2020.
Yep.
But they are depth guys. Some of them are depth guys that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing I think you can look at with, again, the 5 players, and if you want to throw Hazleton kind of connected into the last week or so of transfer portal news, you can. So you've got Hazleton receiver, Grimsley receiver, Patterson receiver, Pinkney a receiver, Keene a tight end. But I want to specifically focus in on receiver. Because over the last 2 years, I feel like when we talk about this Virginia Tech roster and where they're really deep and they're really recruited well and they're strong, 2 position groups are linebackers and receivers, right? So is this I don't want to say a curse, but is this a trying to think of the right wording here, is this a when you recruit so well at a position but there's so many talented guys, is this the effect of over recruiting at a position?
I don't think in this particular case it is, because we don't have any proof that the other guys on the team are talented yet. They haven't played yet, right? Only thing we know is Trey Turner's a good player. Other than that, I have no idea who's going to play outside receiver at Virginia Tech. I know Damon Hazleton could have come back and been a starter. Phil Patterson, there were always issues with Phil Patterson. Physically talented player, but just not in there. We heard it like halfway through this past season that there was a very good chance he was gonna be out, like just missed, and not from like a football program decision, but from like a university decision, right? So
yeah, I remember that. I've forgotten about that. There
were people like he missed a couple games and then came back, and there were people surprised that he was back on the team, like very, very surprised. So. There have been issues with him for a while. Grimsley, the issue with his mom, we don't know any details there, but I guess wants to get back closer to home. So
we'll see where he winds up.
We'll see where he winds up. I know Fuente loves Grimsley. Like I remember last year, I asked Fuente before the 2018 season, I said, who stood out to you in the strength and conditioning program in the offseason? The first name he said was Grimsley. Loves his work ethic, loves him as a person. I think Fuente handled Grimsley well. I remember on Tech Talk Live this year, he got the question about Grimsley and his production, and he said, in August, he had a bad few days of practice, and, instead of, yelling at him, get it together, he went to him and was like, something going on behind the scenes that I need to know about. It's affecting your performance. And Grimsley finally came out and told him the issue with his mom, whatever that issue was. So I think that situation was handled well by both parties. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he's definitely going to go. Like anybody in the transfer portal can come back.
Yeah, and that was actually to lead real quick to one of my questions. I'm sure we'll get on Facebook Live. Any chance any of these 5 return?
Grimsley would be the one that would be the biggest chance, I've been told. We'll see. I think he's just trying to figure out his options and what he wants to do. I know with he's a versatile guy. He'll be a senior next year. He's played inside receiver. He's played outside receiver. I think there's playing time available, and I think the fact that he can fit into either role. But at the same time, I don't know exactly what's going on with his mom. And he's a private person. And
no, by the way, it's been publicly acknowledged that something's going on at home, just not what it is.
Right, just not what it is. No, you're right. He's a private person. He has not publicly come out and said anything, and I don't blame him. I probably wouldn't either. But I'll understand whatever decision he wants to make.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Hazleton is actually already pledged to, or whatever you want to call it, to Missouri.
Put a graphic out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Hazleton went in the portal before the semester started, which means he would not be on scholarship. That's my understanding. Correct me if
Oh,
I'm
he's already
wrong.
graduated. There's no reason for him to come back yet.
Yeah, there's no reason for him to go through spring practice here. And
Yeah.
and my guess is that he'll hop down to Missouri and get enrolled in classes and go through spring practice with them. That's what I would
I don't know when their semester started or anything like that. Or,
I think at this point everybody's
I think it's everybody started, but
So
you
you
would
got-
think you have a week or so
you got
after it officially starts.
force ed late.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean they
absolutely.
get a ton of football players get a ton of academic support. So whatever they need to make happen, they can make happen. But
Yeah, and it's not like, I mean, that guy's already graduated. It's not like he needs this specific class or that specific class. Just get down there and enroll in 12 credit hours. They're open classes you can get and just roll with it.
I was going to say he may have an understanding with the Missouri coaching staff that he's coming in the summer, but no coaching staff worth their salt is going to tell the kid to just hang out for a semester. They'll say, get down here and go through practice with us.
Yeah.
Learn
Yeah.
the
If it's
terminology,
possible,
learn
for
the
sure.
system. Yeah.
And real quick, thoughts on that for Hazleton? I mean, of course, Barry Odom just got let go as their coach. New coaching staff coming in. SEC. I mean, is that a?
I don't know. Without knowing the other options he had, it's hard to say. Who's our quarterback? It was Kelly Bryant, right? This
And
past
he's
year, but I
graduated.
think
It's
he
going to be.
graduated.
Yep.
So I don't even know what their quarterback situation is. So it's hard to know.
Missouri is not a team I pay any attention to.
Yeah.
And they're in the SEC East. They're not
Oh,
in the West.
Didn't they win that division? They're like their first 2 years in the SEC.
Yeah, their first couple years they were
the SEC
really good.
The SEC East was bad, and they were kind of at their peak of their program. They were a good program when they joined the SEC, but they were really, really well coached. They had an exceptional coach down there, in my opinion, and Pinkle, I believe, Gary Pinkle.
Oh, Gary Pinkle, yeah.
But that's just that was never going to be sustained. It was impossible to sustain.
They
that.
took Virginia Tech's slot.
They probably did, and that's just a brutal. I mean, they get a lot more money now than they used to, right?
Yeah.
And how has it helped them?
Yeah.
It hasn't. It's just more competition.
They hired Elijah. I love this name, Elijah Drinkwitz, who was the head coach at App State for 1 year, and then took the Missouri job.
That's an interesting hire
Ooh.
because that's a guy who won for 1 year at Appalachian State with somebody else's players, and now he takes over Missouri. That's a
He was the
that's a little bit
quarterback.
of a reach.
Yeah.
No, honestly, man, these days just about every coaching hire is kind of a crapshoot these days. I think.
So, anyways, don't need to talk about Missouri for too long, but that is where Damon Hazleton is going. Again, the 5 players in the portal that were announced over the weekend: Grimsley, Ladler, Patterson, Stewart, and Pinkney.
Yeah, well, we spent the whole season thinking Grimsley wasn't going to be back next year. I assumed he'd declare for the draft and not the transfer portal. I don't know if he's got a chance to improve his draft stock more at Missouri.
Who are we talking about? Grimsley?
Excuse me. Did I say
Hazleton.
Grimsley? I meant Hazleton.
Hazleton.
Yes,
right.
you said
Well,
Grimsley, you meant Hazleton.
Yeah, I spent the whole season assuming Hazleton wouldn't be back. We were under the assumption that he was going to declare for the draft. Instead, he hits the transfer portal. I don't know, without knowing Missouri's quarterback situation, I don't know if he has a chance to catch more passes there than at Virginia Tech. I know that Virginia Tech as a team obviously benefited from Hendon Hooker becoming the starting quarterback. I think the wide receivers, especially the outside receivers, would have put up better numbers statistically with Ryan Willis at quarterback. Tech, as a team and a program, wouldn't have won as many games, but Damon Hazleton would have had an opportunity to catch more passes. Now, granted, if Damon Hazleton could catch the football over the middle between the 20s, then he would have caught more passes anyway.
But he would have more receptions.
Yeah, so it's one of those things. This is going to be a big loss for Virginia Tech in the red zone. I don't know how much of a loss it'll be between the 20s. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go over the list. So you go to the transfer portal listing on 247sports.com. And for Virginia Tech, we know about Hazleton and we know about these 5 guys. 14 guys are listed as being in the portal for Virginia Tech. So some of these names, you've probably forgotten. I'll bet if you asked your typical Hokie fan, they couldn't name all 14.
Right.
Well, no, they
Well,
couldn't.
you go through them and we'll talk I'll do a brief sentence on each player.
Right. So
and their background.
So these 5 guys, which were part of that announcement. So Caleb Stewart,
running back, buried on the depth chart. Obviously, Fuente. I don't think he's happy with the talent at running back, and he's got a new running backs coach now, and he's turning that position over.
Jacoby Pinkney.
We already talked about him.
Phil Patterson.
Already talked about him.
Grimsley.
Already talked about him.
Ladler.
Yeah.
And Hazleton. So here are the guys that we haven't talked about lately. DeJuan Ellis. That was announced a long time ago.
He's been in the portal since August.
Right.
So he got beat out by Tavion Robinson and then quit.
And bailed quickly. Yeah, so but he's technically a 2020 portal entry for the Hokies. All right.
Right.
Next one is John Harris.
Remember, he started at center the second game of the season, and then at halftime was replaced by Hudson.
And do you remember when he announced? I don't remember when he announced.
It was after the regular season.
After the regular
season.
season.
So he stuck it out the whole season, but basically he's third or fourth string center and had been passed by a younger player.
Yeah.
And you know where he ended up? It was like Mercer or somewhere like that. So.
It's the logo is MU.
It's Mercer.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Joe Kane.
Yeah, Joe Kane transferred to an
Elon
FCS program. So,
All right, and a couple guys that you probably could have been able to name these. Robert Porche.
Who also, I think he ended up at North Carolina A&T.
It looks like a little bulldog.
Yeah.
They're the Aggies.
So we've got some guys in here who, I think Charlie Wiles got the most he could get out of Robert Porche, probably.
And Nathan Proctor.
Went JUCO. Don't know where he'll end up.
Yeah. And again, this is how this works. Houshun Gaines is listed on the 2020.
Right. He wasn't even on the team this past year. Yeah.
So,
and that's some tough circumstances for him.
And then a couple other names that are somewhat random. Edric Ward.
Walk-on. I don't even know why they put walk-ons on the list.
And Louis Mahota.
Also a walk-on.
Yeah.
So, is it related to Vinny?
Yes, his brother.
Yeah. So I think that's all 14 guys. So when you hear the number 14 guys, and then you start going through them, you know, there's 4 or 5 guys there that weren't on the team or were walk-ons or whatever. Right. So and we'll talk about that in a minute.
You know, we don't know that. Like, I don't even know why they'd list walk-ons. Like why?
Yeah.
What's the point?
I don't know.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this though, because again, the transfer portal has really changed the landscape of college athletics over the last 2 years. Is that fair to say? 2? I mean, at the beginning of the Coach Fuente's tenure, just to put that in perspective, this wasn't a thing really, the transfer portal. So, is this something that I'm not going to say Tech fans, I'm going to say college football fans should expect every year to have 8+ guys enter the transfer portal, and are the days gone, like after the Kentucky game when fans, we've got 21 players coming back, are the days gone where we can just say, they're going to be seniors next year, everybody's coming back? Is it going to be a year-by-year basis?
I think right now that there are no caps or restrictions on the transfer portal. You can enter it at any date. Like, I don't know what DeJuan Ellis was thinking. All right, so he redshirted his first year out of high school, and then he would have been a redshirt freshman this past year, and then he chose to enter the portal in August.
Yeah.
And so he didn't play this past year, and he's not landed anywhere, right? Has he? Or is he at Maryland?
He's technically for Maryland.
Of course, he went to Maryland.
Confirmed.
Maryland, who was also on the list for number of portal entries.
Yeah, they have quite a few.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It was announced August 21st. DeJuan Ellis to Maryland.
Okay.
Wow.
So that guy, he's basically taken 2 years off of football right now. So he got into Maryland. He learned their system and everything like that. So I guess he did it right to a certain extent. But I think this stuff of in-season transfers, like the stuff that happened last year when those 2 players, they entered the portal before the season ended. Like, they stopped playing in the middle of the season.
Was it Rico Kearney?
Rico Kearney, and there was one more.
He just left UCF, I believe, by the way.
Did he really?
Wow. Let me confirm that, but I'm pretty sure he announced he is leaving UCF.
Okay. So, generally, guys that playing for 2 schools in college is one thing, but guys who end up playing for, like, 3 different schools, that's a them issue. That's not a not a coaching issue or a school issue or anything like that. So that's a Rico Kearney issue if that's the case. But yeah, it's definitely changed the game. But because of the portal, we keep up with the numbers now. Like there is a portal database. Like On247 is a resource for us to use.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
And there was no like database for us to use earlier to compare the numbers before and after the transfer portal was set up and announced and everything like that.
So a project I would like to delve into, haven't had a chance before this podcast, is to just pick a few random Virginia Tech football seasons, look at the roster, and see who would be quote unquote coming back the following year.
Go back and review attrition on a year by year
randomly
basis.
grab the 2006 roster, see all the guys who were supposed to come back,
and all the guys
and look
who
at the
did.
2007 roster and see how many of those guys just disappeared.
Right.
And yes, it wasn't the – well, first of all, 2006, 2007, players weren't announcing on Twitter that they were transferring.
Right. The roster would just come out in August.
You're
and
like,
you'd be
hey,
hey, he's not on
so-and-so.
Yeah, exactly.
They'd sneak it in there on you, you know.
And you'd wait for the first press conference with Frank Beamer, and then you'd find out.
And Virginia Tech fans probably have more insight than most because they would let you know about some of this ahead of time on BeamerBall.com.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
Yep. But I can't find it on Kearney, but I'm confident I saw that somewhere. But so let's do this. Let's go ahead and dive into the notes that Will has put together.
Right.
And Will, I'm going to kind of let you take it from here. But again, I want to kind of show for those watching and listening, we have a 2 sheets of paper.
Right.
Will
It's
has
a
gone
spreadsheet.
through every Power 5 football program and has looked at portal entries in 2019, total number of portal entries in 2019 and 2020, and then how many of those were 3-star or plus players coming into college.
Right.
So in your 3 hours of research, Will, tell us what surprised you when you did this research, or did anything surprise you at all?
So first of all, caveats and that sort of thing. 247sports.com has a transfer portal database. It's been active 2 years, 2019 and 2020. I went and so they list all of the players. So if you look up Virginia Tech in the transfer portal, you will see all the Virginia Tech players that are transferring out and players that are transferring in. Like the database currently shows Khalil Herbert and who's the other player that's
Blackshear.
coming in?
Raheem
Blackshear. So as you're looking through it, counting players, you got to be careful that you're counting players that are going out and not players that are coming in, unless that's what you're looking to research. We just went over the list of Virginia Tech players, and it includes Edric Ward, whom I've never even heard of,
Right.
Louis Mahota, who I knew was on the team, Haushin Gaines, who wasn't on the team this past year. So you quickly realize there's some slop in there. And it's not a Virginia Tech thing. Trust me, I went through 65 teams. They've all got walk-ons, and I think I saw one team that had 3 kickers listed as transferring out. So don't think everybody's out to get Virginia Tech. That slop is there for every team, and I think you can cut your way through some of the slop by just looking at the guys who are 3-star recruits coming out of high school. That will eliminate your walk-ons. Mm-hmm. Even some of your preferred walk-ons, like a guy might be a 2-star, and instead of going to a place like Elon, he might walk on at a place like Tech, just as a random example.
Right.
What else did I want to say about that? It's not perfect because some schools at the bottom of the rung, like Rutgers, you go looking through Rutgers transfer list, and there's a handful of 2-star guys on there, and they may have been legitimately recruited out of high school by Rutgers, who isn't a good recruiting team, Right. And I thought I saw a lot of 2-star guys on the list for Illinois as well. Now, ironically, Damon Hazelton was a 2-star recruit out of high school.
He sure was.
So I crunched these numbers for every school, just the raw number of guys in the transfer portal and the number of guys who were 3-star recruits coming out of high school, which generally indicates that they were recruited by that school as scholarship players. All right. So let's cut to some of the numbers. So Malcolm on the television put up the graphic that shows ACC, Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12. All right, so I don't know how well you can see that. And so for people who are just listening, this is all going to go into an article that I'll try to get written today. I'm wrestling with, do I want to make it a subscriber article or make it a free article? I will probably make it a free article because there's so much data in here. And, oh, by the way, some of the caveats that I left out were the 2019 portal is complete. That's over. That date is over. 2020 is in process. It's not complete yet because it really isn't over until the 2020 football season starts. Look at DeJuan Ellis.
Right.
He's in the 2020 database, and he bailed in August.
Right. I don't know with the exact cutoff date, like when will 2021 begin?
Yeah.
I'm guessing
When the season starts is when the 2020 portal officially shuts down.
But if that was the case, then Ellis would be 2019 because he declared before the season starts.
So
okay, so I think it's after the semester, spring semester.
all right.
So anybody up to May.
But that's
whatever.
the point I wanted to make.
After
is
spring
that
practice.
You see a handful of guys bail when the semester starts because they can keep their scholarships while they shop around, and you'll see some more guys bail after spring practice when they figure out what their playing time's likely to be. So 2020 is still in process. So these numbers are as of January 26th, 2020. Today's 27th, right?
Yes.
Yeah, as of last night. So across Power 5 in I'll just without bogging it down too much for the people that are listening, I'll just go with the combined stats for 2019 and 2020. So across Power 5, each team in 2019 and 2020 combined had an average of 16.8 players enter the portal. 13.5 of those were 3-star recruits or above. So 16.8, 13.5 over the course of 2 years. Virginia Tech has 32 players in the portal in 2 years versus the average of 16.8. And 25 of Virginia Tech's guys were 3-star plus recruits versus the average of 13.5.
So double, basically.
So almost twice as many guys for Virginia Tech. So, Malcolm, let's go to the other graphic, which breaks out 2019, 2020, and combined. All right. So, looks like you got some slop going on there, buddy. You got to figure out.
I don't know what that is.
All right, so he's going to work on that. So, but what I did for 2019 was I went back and looked at 2019, and I listed the 6 schools with the most players in the transfer portal. Arkansas tops the list. In 2019, Arkansas had 23 guys in the portal. 19 of them were 3-star plus guys out of high school. First of all, 23 guys is like a quarter of your total roster,
Right.
So then you get down into Penn State with 21, and I don't know how many of them were running backs. I didn't count that up. And then you have 4 teams tied at 18, UCLA, Louisville, Michigan, and Virginia Tech. And then when you delve into 3 stars, it's Arkansas at 19, Penn State at 18, UCLA 17, Louisville and Michigan 15, and Virginia Tech 14.
Yeah, that's 2019.
2019. So basically in the 2019 portal, Virginia Tech had the 6th most number of guys.
This was the Eric Kuma portal. That year.
Yes.
The Chris Cunningham, Eric Kuma, Rico Kearney, that whole deal. And actually, in terms of total number of guys in the portal, Tech was tied for 3rd. So you jump to 2020, and as it stands now, Stanford and Maryland have 15 players in the portal, with 14 and 13 of those guys being 3-star plus, respectively. Virginia Tech is 2nd or 3rd, however you want to classify it, with 14 guys in the portal. 11 of those are 3-star plus. Then you got Miami with 13, Oklahoma with 12, Arkansas with 12, and Duke with 11. So that's your top 7 for 2020, and you see the appearance of Arkansas and Virginia Tech in both lists. So when you go to combined 2019 and 2020 players in the portal, Arkansas tops the list with 35 guys, 30 of which were 3-star recruits or better. Virginia Tech is number 2 with 32 portal entries, 25 of which were 3 stars or better. UCLA and Maryland have 30, Michigan 29, Rutgers 28, Penn State 27, and Oklahoma 26. Oklahoma actually has a lot of guys in the portal both years. I think they had 12 guys one year and 14 another. But So to boil it down for you, and if it feels like Tech has had a lot of guys enter the transfer portal, and you're not sure because you haven't really paid attention to all of college football, your perception is correct. Arkansas is number 1 and Virginia Tech's number 2 in terms of number of players entering the portal. I don't know how many of these guys came back. Hendon Hooker and Deshaun McCleese went into the portal and came back and contributed quite a bit. I didn't go that far. I don't have that kind of time.
So they were actually – so McCleese and Hooker were actually listed on the database.
That's right.
Okay.
McCleese and Hooker are included in those numbers.
Okay.
It's everybody who entered it without any accounting for did they go somewhere else, did they come back, whatever. And I guess the last thing for me to say is I have no agenda here. I'm not trying to make a point or anything. I'm just putting numbers out there so people can talk intelligently about it and say, yes, these are the numbers, instead of just freaking out emotionally. Or so there's this argument that goes on about, we've had a lot of guys enter the portal, and somebody will answer, well, it's just visible. Everybody else has too. Okay, not as many as Virginia Tech. None of these guys were going to start to contribute anyway. There's no accounting for any of that here. And I'm sure when you start taking data in the aggregate, whatever is true for your team becomes true for other teams as well. Correct. Yes. I remember looking at one team I don't remember who it was, they had 4 players in the portal for one of the years, and 3 of them were no-star guys. They were walk-ons. Mm-hmm. So this is a team that's done a very good job of hanging on to the scholarship players that they recruited.
You know what's really interesting? You go back to the combined list, and Arkansas 35, 30 of them 3-star, Tech second, 32. But you look at the schools, and I find it interesting because of the different perceptions that each of those schools have around the country, right? So we talk about Arkansas. They fired Chad Morris after, a season and a half, mid-season.
Yeah.
Okay, and in the disaster that's been going on there. Then you got UCLA, right? A historic program that's struggling a little bit under second-year coach Chip Kelly. You've got Rutgers in there. I feel like if you had to guess the top 5, you're on Family Feud and you had to guess the top 5 Rutgers, you'd probably guess Rutgers, right?
We should have played that game.
Maryland would be a pretty good guess.
But then, I don't think a lot of people would guess Oklahoma, Penn State,
Michigan.
Those are three top 10 programs in here.
Yeah.
Then, so you got 3 really good programs. Then you've got Rutgers and Maryland, who were just awful.
Look, I feel then I feel like you would guess that. If we're on Family Feud, you would probably guess one of those 2 schools,
sure,
right? And that would be up on the screen.
Right. There's no rhyme or reason to this list. So you've got Rutgers, Maryland, Arkansas, who are all really bad.
Yeah.
You've got Oklahoma, Penn State, and Michigan, who are all really good.
Right.
And then Virginia Tech in the middle.
Right. That is 8-5 and somewhere in the middle.
Michigan's top 15 every year. Penn
right.
State's top 10. Oklahoma's been the college football playoff.
Been in the playoffs
3 of the last 4
right.
years.
And sometimes attrition is good. Like there are some guys that Virginia Tech lost. It was like, okay, Chris Cunningham was going to be 4th string tight end this year, so he left. I don't blame him. John Harris would be 4th string center next year, so he left. I don't blame him. And those guys, just as it turned out, they weren't good enough. There are guys like that. And when you have guys that aren't good enough, honestly, it's best for both parties that they move on and they're replaced by people who have a chance to be good enough, right? But at the same time, there are concerns about losing Eric Kuma.
Right.
There are concerns
Hazelton.
about losing Damon Hazelton. Like, if Damon Hazelton had ended up somewhere that I thought was a stable situation, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. Missouri, come on. They just got a new coach who has been head coach for a school for 1 year. I don't even know who their quarterback's going to be.
That's
like he's walking from a known situation into an unknown situation, and he's more comfortable with the unknown situation.
Do you remember off your top of your head where Hazelton's from?
Baltimore.
So that's not it. I know he went to Ball State originally. That's at least a little closer to Missouri than Virginia Tech is, but
One thing I want to do, too, real quick before we wrap up, because we do have to talk about some basketball here on the Tech Sideline Podcast, presented by the Fisher Law Firm, recording on Monday, January 27th. So, again, I like the combined. I think that's really interesting because, like Louisville was high in 2019, obviously, because of a coaching change. I mean, that makes sense. And then it was a little bit down this year. So, over a 2-year span, again, we're just going off the numbers. Tech at 32. I want to look at the ACC real quick and just kind of compare and contrast. So, over a 2-year span, Virginia has had 10 portal entries in 2 years. Syracuse has had 6.
Just 6.
21 total for UNC, 25 for Louisville, but again, 18 of those were in 2019.
Yeah.
And then, the one that surprises me too is how about Georgia Tech with 10 combined over 2 years? You think from moving from a triple option offense and how you might try and turn that roster over, only 10?
Yeah, the thing about Georgia Tech is they recruited so poorly from a traditional standpoint that a lot of those guys on that team, they're not good enough to play anywhere else. I mean, think about it. Syracuse only had one guy in the portal this year, right?
I would counter that the kids don't know that. They're
That's
arrogant
true.
enough to jump into that portal and think the suitors are going to line up.
Yeah,
So-
that's true.
So again, the ACC, let's do this combined 3-star players over 2 years. The combined Tech is in first at 25. Tied for second would be Miami and Louisville with 19, and then
UNC with 18.
Yep, Duke
with 17.
Interesting, and then Florida State and NC State. Excuse me. Yes, NC State and
Florida State and NC State with 14 over 2 years.
And the one with the minimum, with the least amount of 3-star kids in the portal the last 2 years, I don't think anybody would get. I'm surprised. Syracuse with 3.
So here's
interesting. It's interesting numbers. Again,
now you look at the Clemson number. They've had 10 portal entries in the last 2 years, and 9 of them were 3-star plus guys.
Right.
That's not very many. So for people who say that kids transfer out because they're not going to play, there's a ton of talent at Clemson, and there's a lot of guys who are buried on the depth chart.
And the thing is, they blow everybody out. They all play. I remember running I remember running the numbers on true freshmen this year. They a number of snaps, and this is like middle of the season. At Clemson, had played like 35 or 40 true freshmen, like including walk-ons, like Kirk Herbstreit's kids who were walk-ons there. They had played,
so guys are getting playing time,
so
they're happier.
So they're right. I mean, they annihilate everybody they play. So all these guys can play the second half.
Plus, winning championships is fun.
Right, exactly. So.
And Alabama, by the way, has a low number of players.
You know what's fascinating, Will, real quick? I know we got to move on, but look at the SEC. And actually, you'd be surprised. You'd maybe think there's so much talent in the SEC. There's more, guys transferring. I mean, look at so Alabama, 3-star players in 2020. You've got 4. Auburn 3, Florida 4, Georgia 3, Kentucky 5, LSU 5, Ole Miss 8 with a coaching staff, Mississippi State 2, Missouri 2. South Carolina 7, Tennessee 8, Texas A&M 9. I mean, that's
all right. The program that I feel like Virginia Tech should be modeled after is Wisconsin's. They've had 9 transfers.
Tell us why you think Wisconsin.
Wisconsin recruits poorly. They recruit to their culture. To me, there's no difference between signing the 20th class and the 40th ranked class, right? Wisconsin, their recruiting class is ranked in the 40s every year. And yet they rank in the top 10 every year because they recruit guys that are perfect fits for their culture, right? And I think that's where Justin Fuente at times has screwed up. I think coming from Memphis to Virginia Tech, you come into it knowing that you have a better opportunity to recruit more talent, but you've got to be able to recruit players that you can coach.
Yeah.
And I don't going out and getting Cam Good. I don't blame Justin Fuente for whether he kicked Cam Good off the team or whether he basically just made him quit. I don't blame Justin Fuente for that situation other than the fact that he recruited Cam Good in the first place.
Right.
A guy who was not a cultural fit. Wisconsin, I get they don't care about recruiting rankings. If they did, I'm sure they could recruit better than the 40th ranked class. That's an 80 or 90,000 seat stadium with a lot of money and a big name.
Yeah.
But to them, their success is built on bringing in the right people that are good fits for their program. And
well, there's two sides to that coin. Number one, you got to identify them. Number two, you got to close on them.
Right.
Right. And is Virginia Tech failing? Was Cam good here because Virginia Tech failed to close on guys that would have been?
No, he was an early guy.
Yeah.
His film was awesome.
Yeah.
It was hard to turn away, man.
For a big, heavy dude, he was a good athlete.
Yeah.
He is a good athlete.
Yeah.
It's not like he's gone.
Really, really great discussion, and I think we could spend like another hour talking about this.
So I'll try to crunch an article later
was about
and
to
put
say-
all these numbers out there so you'll be able to see every single team.
I mean, this is really great stuff here from Will. And speaking of Will getting ready to write an article as we get ready to take our break here on Tech Sideline, worth mentioning, it's a great time to become part of the Tech Sideline family. $84.99 is the annual price, $8.49 the monthly price, $29.99 the student price. Some great content right now on Tech Sideline. Chris, I'll ask you midway through the podcast. We've got some great content on there right now.
Yeah, we do. And I'm going to have a Brandon Patterson article later today. Yeah, lots of good stuff coming.
Yeah, and I tell you what, the Fisher Law Firm Friday Q&A, you go really in depth with those questions. I can tell you enjoy writing.
Oh, I
too.
love writing the Q&A. It's actually content that I don't have to come up with. It's just passes it right back to our users and basically say, hey, give me ideas for articles.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, that seems like an interesting question. And those articles are Friday Q&A is generally anywhere from 1,500 words to 2,500 words, occasionally up to 3,000. And I generally get them written in about an hour. It's very, very, very. They're very quick.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would thought it takes longer. How in depth do you go? That's pretty impressive there.
Yeah, I not really. I mean, I try to pick the questions I can answer that I think I could do the best job of answering.
And then I think the one that everyone needs to read, and I tried to, if I can talk, if I try and do a really good job of highlighting Olympic sports. Corey Van Dyke last week wrote a great article on Jacoby Patterson.
He sure did.
Destination Tokyo ? What he has accomplished real quick, and we'll throw this in there before we go to break because I think that it should be known amongst Virginia Tech fans what Jacoby Patterson's been able to do. It's just been incredible. He broke the collegiate record in the 300 meters.
He is the 11th fastest human being in the history of the world in the 300 meters. So put that into perspective.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So that's a great read. Again, that's all the great content.
Oh man, and the analytics article for baseball that he did last week I thought was great. And it gives an idea of some of the resources some schools are dedicating to their athletics these days. Like Wake Forest has a PhD professor running their pitching lab, Wake Forest baseball. So like if Wake Forest baseball is throwing that kind of resources into the program, that what are some of these big football programs throwing into their football programs that we don't even know about?
Great discussion.
Right? I mean, just ridiculous the amount of money that's being spent.
Again, $84.99 is the annual price, $8.49 is the monthly price, $29.99 is the student price. Great time to become part of the TSL family with all of we have going on with the football and the transfer portal news and off season, the basketball. It's a great time to join TSL. All right, we're going to take a time out here on the Tech Sideline Podcast. When we come back, we transition to the hardwood, and I'm going to ask Will and Chris, does the loss at Boston College on Saturday ruin Virginia Tech's chances of making the NCAA tournament? Don't go anywhere. This is the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm. Welcome back into the Tech Sideline Podcast, recording on Monday, January 27th, episode 112 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Glad you're with us. Evan Hughes, Will Stewart, Chris Coleman, Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes. Get ready to start dropping those questions on Facebook Live. Malcolm will get to those at the end of the show. All right, we transition now from football to men's basketball, where it was a up and down week for Hokies men's hoops last week that started with a thriller. As Will said, he predicted Virginia Tech for his well-being against North Carolina. He needed that win, the emotional well-being, and he got it. It might have taken a little bit longer than he wanted, but double overtime win against North Carolina. Tyrese Radford, the tip-in at the end, and Virginia Tech found a way to win a game when they weren't playing their best through the entire game against North Carolina. But it's tough to talk about that because Saturday, Hokies go to Boston College, and they fall on the road 61-56. Virginia Tech hit 1 3-pointer in the second half, and that was Jalen Cone with less than a minute left to cut the deficit to 59-56. Chris, as I said before we went to break, I'm going to ask you straight up. Does this loss hurt Virginia Tech's NCAA tournament chances in a big way?
Yeah, big way. Because there are few opportunities for quality wins in the ACC this year. So you want to avoid bad losses. So if you're only going to have 2, maybe 3 quality wins on the season, you don't want to fill up the far right over there with bad losses.
With red dots.
With red dots, exactly. You want to be able to say, okay, we didn't beat that many great teams. We didn't lose to any bad ones either. But now here it is. Here's a bad loss.
The first one of the year.
Yeah, the first one of the year. So it's a credit, I think, to the team and Mike Young that for a team that's, a 9-man rotation, 2/3 of them are freshmen, that they've been able to last this long without a bad, quote unquote, bad loss, right? It's disappointing because they did lead the game by 10 points at one point.
They were looking really good at one point there in the first half.
They did. They got down 10-5 or something like that, 10-4.
10-5, ran off 14 straight
14
points.
straight points, and were just hammering BC.
Yeah, and at one point they were at 22-12.
And at that, and with Nolly and Radford not even starting.
Yeah.
So I bet Mike Young had a bad weekend. Now, when you wake up on Saturday and some of your key players miss the bus or are late to the bus to shoot around,
and that was
because they overslept.
That was Nolly and Radford.
That was Nolly and Radford.
And I believe
somebody told me Aline.
Yes,
there were 3 of them.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. So 3 key players for you.
Did Aline start?
No. Couture started.
Okay.
So when you've got 3 key players like that, it reminds me. Now you would remember this better than me. Well, I don't remember it at all because I was barely alive.
NCAA tournament.
NCAA tournament in the 1980s when Tech had some key players missed the team bus completely to the arena.
Right.
And Charlie Moyer just leave them at the hotel?
I don't think they even played the entire first half.
Right.
And I remember thinking,
NCAA tournament?
Yeah, it's the NCAA tournament. It's like, come on, Charlie, don't take a stand now.
Yeah.
Get those guys to the
just
arena.
run them really hard in the offseason.
Come on, man.
Good. Again, 61-56, the final from that game. I mean, I keep going back to we did our basketball-only podcast in November, and of course, nobody really saw this team doing what they've been doing right now, exceeding expectations, soaring high, even after a loss like this, Boston College. But I just can vividly remember the conversation that you brought up, Chris, and that this is a freshman team who's going to make freshman mistakes at points in the season.
That whole day on Saturday, 3 freshmen not showing up to the bus on time because they overslept or whatever. That's your sign that they're not mentally dialed in that day, right? So I'm pretty sure Mike Young is pretty disgusted.
I didn't watch his post game, but somebody.
It was a minute 56 on YouTube. It was I think it was a minute 56.
Oh, was he in there longer and they just cut out the cut?
I don't think so. I think it was very.
I don't know. I didn't listen to it.
And post game, just 3 questions from Laser and Burnup.
Yeah. So he was livid. Not just that they lost, but the reasons behind the loss.
Right.
Now, what we know is our Virginia Tech's not as bad as they showed on Saturday. They're also probably not as good as that 5-3 ACC record that they had going into Saturday.
Yeah.
I mean, no, let's be honest about some things here. When Virginia Tech beat NC State, the Wolfpack were without their leading scorer and rebounder, a guy who averages almost a double-double.
And they shot poorly.
That's extremely important. When Virginia Tech beat Syracuse on the road, Syracuse has an 8-man rotation. They had 2 guys hurt, so they only played 6 guys against Virginia Tech that night.
And Dolezaj fouled out, I believe.
I think so. And then
he did.
And then when they came back to Blacksburg, they had their 2 players back. They had their full rotation. When Virginia Tech played UNC, not only was the Tar Heels without Cole Anthony, Brandon Robinson missed that game too. He came back this past weekend and had 29 points against Miami.
They score over 90.
91.
91.
Unreal.
Blew Miami out.
So Virginia Tech, throughout their long history of basketball, it's always been Virginia Tech who's been on the unlucky end when it comes to injuries.
Yeah.
This year they've been extremely fortunate, not only with staying healthy themselves, but with the timing of opposing teams' injuries.
That's right.
Like missing games against Virginia Tech. So this is a team that should not have been 5-3 if everybody else had its full complement of players.
And there have been games where the opponent just frankly has shot poorly.
Right.
You know, Syracuse didn't shoot well up in the dome.
NC State didn't shoot well.
NC State didn't shoot well.
When you go through a 20-game schedule, there's going to be games you lose because you don't shoot well, and there's going to be games you win because the opponents don't shoot well. That will even out for everybody by the end of that 20 games. But we'll know exactly who we are by the end of that 20-game schedule. But we're not the 5-3 basketball team that they looked like, that they were heading into Boston College. But at the same time, they aren't as bad as they showed on Saturday. Now, what we do know is they have very little margin for error. If they don't show up focused, ready to play, they can lose to a really bad team.
Virginia Tech 14-6, 5-4 in ACC. Before we get to questions, Will, at Miami, as we record today on Monday morning, tomorrow, that's January 28th, and Coral Gables. On Saturday, they host one of the tallest teams in the ACC, number 5 and 6, Florida State. But then next week, Georgia Tech, Boston College, Pitt. So again, the next 5 games, Miami, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Boston College, and Pittsburgh. Any chance the Hokies could get on a roll here and salvage any hopes of an NCAA tournament?
They could win 4 of the next 5 games. It's possible. They could also lose 4 of the next 5 games, right?
And how do you see tomorrow? Do you think the Hokies bounce back tomorrow against Miami?
I don't know too much about them. I haven't written the preview yet.
Miami's pretty bad, and they're for the 3rd year in a row they only have about 8 guys available.
Right, they're bad, but they're like Miami football. They've got enough athletes where they can go out there. If you don't play your game and they have a really good night, they can hammer you, right?
And so Virginia Tech was in Chestnut Hill. Then I believe due to NCAA rules, they had to come home. So they're home. Then they're flying to Miami.
Yeah.
You know, this is a tough stretch of being on the road to the 2 furthest destinations.
The 2 furthest destinations in the ACC. So you play at Boston Tuesday afternoon. The game ends about 4 o'clock. You probably get to the airport at like 6 or something like that. Fly back to Blacksburg. You have to travel to Miami today on Monday. Right. So how much practice time do you give them on Sunday, or do you give them a day to recharge their batteries, so to speak? Right. That was the areas where Buzz was always a genius. Like, he knew exactly when to turn it up a notch and when to dial it back in practice. Right. You know, he always talked about
the emotional
tank and the 3 emotional, physical, and mental, or something like that. He was a genius at managing that, and so this is one of those areas where that has to be managed, and you know, without being in there with the team. Like, if they actually overslept on Saturday, they ought to be fresh now, right? You know, so I don't know if Mike Young decided to do an extra harder practice on Sunday, or dial it back a bit, or just go completely normal. I really don't know.
So it gets into this, and we had this debate on the message board about do you let those 3 young men, you know, stand on their own and learn a lesson? Or my stance was, hey, this is a coaching staff that's collectively getting paid about $3.5 million. And you see all the suits sitting in all the chairs on the sidelines. I think you can appoint one guy to make sure everybody's
right. I mean, these days, basketball staffs, I mean, there are more coaches on the bench than players.
Right.
For most teams. And so why is there not a GA who 30 minutes before you're supposed to be at the bus isn't knocking on every single door?
I get that you're trying to mold young men and you need to let them do things on their own. We're talking about winning and losing basketball games and possibly going or not going to the NCAA tournament. I think we can do a little hand-holding here, especially since we're getting paid $3.5 million a year.
Right.
All right, hand-holding. That's how we're going to close this hardwood
$2 million in Mike Young's case. But,
collectively, with all those guys, there's got to be another $1.5 million there.
The Hokies are 14-6, 5-4 at Miami on Tuesday, Florida State at home, and Castle on Saturday. Those are the 2 games this week. Okay, now without further ado, it's time to turn it over to our Facebook Live portion of the Tech Sideline Podcast, episode 112, brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. Malcolm will get ready to drop some questions. I'm going to start with one though, because I have a feeling one might go this way, and I wanted to bring it up during football. So, ESPN a long time ago announced that they were going to do a 30 for 30 on Michael Vick.
Right.
On Thursday, part 1 of Vick, as they're calling it, airs on ESPN. How intrigued are you guys to watch the documentary? Will you watch it live?
Yeah, I didn't know it was coming out this quick, but I'll carve out some time for sure. I didn't know it was going to be 2 parts either.
I have a pre-screening login so I can check it out before it comes out Thursday.
Ooh.
So I will do my best to get it watched. I can't remember if I get to see both parts or just the first one. but I'll do my best to get it watched and
have a podcast review next time.
Oh, we could
give you an idea of what to expect.
I'm curious to see how much of it, like that first episode, is it just football related? Is it him growing up? Is it tech? I'm curious, like who is going to be interviewed from Virginia Tech?
I predict you'll see a lot of Tommy Riemann in that first episode.
You're going to see a lot of Tommy Riemann. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they interviewed Jim Cavanaugh. Because we interviewed Jim Cavanaugh about the Vic recruitment. He was Vic's lead recruiter for Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
And he used to talk about how he knew exactly where to find Michael. He could go to the Boys and Girls Club in Newport News.
Yeah.
And he just understood that area and where Michael hung out and who he was around. And it's such a shame that guys like that don't hang out at the Boys and Girls Club anymore, as far as recruits go.
Yeah.
Like they're out with their 757 coach now, and so the
yeah.
Jim Cavanaughs of the world might not be as effective today, but
it's tough, man.
Yeah. It's much different.
I think a podcast review would be interesting. When it's all said and done.
We got an empty seat on the couch there that we need to put Jim Cavanaugh in that thing one day.
We do. I was thinking about that the other day, actually.
All right, with that, now I'll turn it over to Malcolm for questions.
All right. My webcam won't show up, so I'm not on the couch today, unfortunately.
We miss you.
Yeah. But we'll start with Damian Brink. Are the Hokies getting more from the transfer portal than they are losing talent-wise?
Well, they're only getting 2 guys.
And that's Raheem Blackshear and
Khalil Herbert.
I think we'll see. I am of the belief that Tech needs an upgrade at running back, and I do think Herbert is going to help them a lot there. They definitely needed help in the slot, and I know Blackshear is listed as a running back, but I'm pretty sure he's going to play in the slot for Virginia Tech.
Right.
They might actually get more production this year than they lost for this particular year. Losing Hazleton stinks in the red zone. But as far as everybody else, what did Grimsley catch, like 10 passes this year?
Yeah, but it's not just offensive production. It's Ladler and could he have played and made plays for you this year? And I don't see anybody coming in from the portal.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to back up at Whip.
Yeah.
Of course, you aren't going to get anybody from the portal to back up anybody. No, nobody's going to transfer to be a backup somewhere else. They're transferring because they're backups. Right, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. I think it might actually be close this year. From a numbers of players standpoint, no, it's not going to be close. I read an article last week. I mean, the Tech had to lose some of those guys just to get below 85 scholarships.
True.
Because they've had so few seniors on the team the last 2 years. So there's a chance. Like let's say for the sake of argument that Khalil Herbert comes in and is Justin Fuente's first 1,000-yard rusher. Will we look back and say, oh, Virginia Tech broke even or even was ahead when it come to the transfer portal this year? I don't know. We'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Good question.
All right. Anthony Price, who can play wide receiver this year?
It's amazing at this time last year we thought wide receiver depth was going to be a great strength. And I remember going up to the Notre Dame game and just watching basically Tech's 2 starting outside receivers play every single snap of that game. And I'm just like, and I was really struck by the fact is like, we got bodies at wide receiver, but we have no depth.
Yeah.
And now it's with Hazleton gone and Phil Patterson gone. There's even less now.
So you got Turner on the outside.
You got Turner on the outside.
You got outside with him.
Right now, James Mitchell.
Wow.
Right?
Well, hopefully Daryl Simmons will step up.
Right. So it's got to be Daryl Simmons. It's got to be Elijah Bowick. It's got to be Jaden Payhoot.
Right. So there are guys there. They're just unproven.
They're just unproven. For all we know, Jaden Payhoot might have a breakout year. He might turn out to be a great player, but there's no evidence to support that.
Well,
right
in all
now.
my coaching wisdom, I have a piece of advice for the Virginia Tech coaching staff. Teach Jaden Payhout how to get off the line of scrimmage, fight off coverage, and then just do like the fat kid when you were young. You go long.
Right.
Just send that kid downfield at top speed and try to get it out there to him.
Yeah, the thing is that what bothers me about that is that's not Hooker's game.
Forte.
Yeah, So it's not a great fit from that standpoint. But at the same time, I think he brings an element to the wide receiver position that hasn't been there in a while for Tech, as in pure speed.
Sheer speed.
So they did play him this year in 2 games as a true freshman. Was still able to preserve his red shirt because of the 4-game rule. So that shows me that he's a little bit ahead of the other young guys, I think, and they're very high on his future. And he's got a good head on his shoulders too. He's a guy who, was a quarterback in high school. Virginia Tech found him at a satellite camp. There was only film on him as a quarterback, not really as a receiver, but he went to camp and just blew it up as a receiver. And, he ended up adding offers from teams like Penn State and Ohio State. Once it got out there that he was such a good athlete.
Yeah.
But he stuck with his commitment to Tech. Hopefully it pays off. I think he's got a good chance to play a lot this year. He might have to play a lot by default. And, of course, there's always the chance that Tech brings in a grad transfer outside receiver. They're looking at that kid from Marshall. I forget his name.
Obi Odabale or something
like that.
And I have a little information on him. Apparently, he's just a great kid. I know somebody who knows him, and this person texted me and said he is a great kid.
Started out as a walk-on at Oklahoma State.
Well, and Khalil Herbert's also just getting rave reviews as just an outstanding guy that Kansas really hates to lose.
Yeah.
Never mind the talent part of it. He's a great kid, good leader.
And I'll throw out there a receiver as well. Talking about who started for Hazleton, who's hurt beginning. It was Caleb Smith, who had a breakout game against Boston College and didn't see as much playing time down the stretch.
Correct.
But I really do believe that Caleb Smith could be a very productive player at Tech.
Yeah, once Hazleton came back, he kind of got lost in the shuffle. But, yeah, he's another guy. I mean, like I said, Tech needs a couple of those outside receivers to step up.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, last one for me. Joseph Warren asks, at quarterback, what do you see happening with our number 3 after the spring or fall?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a big spring for all 3 quarterbacks. Obviously, if you're Braxton Burmeister, you've started a little bit at Oregon. You've transferred to Virginia Tech. You're a redshirt junior the same year as Hendon Hooker. If you don't beat him out this year, you're probably never going to start.
Yeah.
Because Hooker's just going to get more and more experienced, right? More and more game time. So this is a huge year for Braxton Burmeister as far as his future. Can he be a starting quarterback at the college level or not? It's also a huge spring for Hooker for that reason. Like he's got somebody trying to breathe down his neck.
Yeah.
And then as far as Quincy Patterson goes, if he doesn't, Quincy got a lot of reps this past year because he was the number 2 quarterback after Willis got demoted. So Quincy got a lot of reps in practice. If he gets beaten out for the number 2 spot by Burmeister if Quincy's number 3,
right,
when the season starts and you start preparing for the upcoming opponent, your reps just go way down as a third-string quarterback because the chances, and I know it happened against UNC, but the chances of you needing a third-string quarterback are just so slim. You're limited by the NCAA by the amount of.
If you are that third-string guy, you don't want to bank your future on maybe something unusual will happen and I'll actually have to play.
Right.
You're not going to make that decision.
So if Quincy feels like he's third string out of spring practice, then, and if he wants to play quarterback in the future, yeah, he probably needs to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this question. I think it's a great way to close on that topic. Is there a chance that Braxton Burmeister wins the starting quarterback job?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. But at the same time, and we said this before last season, I don't think the Virginia Tech coaching staff wants a new starting quarterback for the fifth year in a row. They didn't want to do it this past year. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I'm sure they stuck with Willis so long. And let's face it, I mean, Willis played pretty well on the whole for Tech as a junior. Like 24 touchdowns, 9 picks. I mean, I was writing articles doing numerical projections saying, oh, there's an outside shot. He breaks Virginia Tech's passing touchdown record this year, Instead, he got worse. I mean, I don't know how – you can't really see that coming. But they were hesitant to pull the plug on him because you don't want to start all over again for the 4th year in a row with a different quarterback. And All right, so you don't want to do that this year. So that means Braxton Burmeister, he has to significantly outplay Hendon Hooker in practice. All right, they have information on what Hendon Hooker will do in a football game, right?
Not to mention that, without being in the locker room every day, I think Hendon's one of your better leaders on that team. I think the team rallied around him.
Yes,
He had tangible and intangible
correct
positive effects on this team. Will it be the same with Burmeister? I don't know.
Yeah, so you would need to see a lot of evidence in practice that Burmeister's a significant upgrade to make that move.
Yep.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
But that's being said, I've never watched him play before.
Yeah, spring game's going to be interesting for sure because nobody's seen him play at Tech.
Everybody every year says the spring game's going to be interesting, and the spring game is rarely ever interesting once it starts getting played.
That is true. I had high hopes last year. I was thinking we're going to see Quincy and see what it's all about. The only thing that was really awesome about the spring game that stood out was James Mitchell. He made a name for himself in the spring game this past year. So, all right. Well, listen, we're about an hour and 20 minutes in. I think that's a great way to close the podcast. Yeah, but great conversation today regarding. Again, look at all this stuff that Will put together today. Great stuff. I'm looking forward to reading your article about it too, Will, as well. Just on the transfer portal and the numbers as a whole. Talked about the players that are leaving for Tech, men's basketball, the Vic documentary, your questions. Really great episode. And we'll be back on Wednesday with a special edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We're pleased to have Virginia Tech wrestling coach Tony Roby join us on Wednesday.
Hopefully he will not still be angry.
Yeah, I think there were 2 Virginia Tech coaches this past weekend who were not exactly.
We're disappointed in their athletes.
You know what? And actually, I had this written down, and I looked over, and I do want to close this actually. Women's basketball, their best start in ACC history. They're 5-3 right now. They are they're looking really, really good. I went to the first half yesterday. They had a great turnout against Clemson. And just in terms of fan support in the stands, and I tell you what, I think Kenny Brooks is building something special with this year's team. I really do believe that. So,
well, I hope so because they've hit the wall in the ACC play over and over and over, but apparently not this year.
Yeah, a one overtime loss to Duke, and they're 6-2.
It was this point last year where they were losing all those games late. That they got off to big leads and they were losing them late.
They were up by 20
and they finally shook out of that and were a good team the second half of the ACC schedule. But they've done so much damage to themselves early that
they were 0-7 and finished 6-10.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I tell you what, too. This freshman center Elizabeth Kitley, top 50 player coming this year. Real deal inside. Taja Cole's been an excellent grad transfer. I don't know if you guys saw the 3 that Darren Mabry made against UVA from the logo that put the Asia Shepherd. This team's got some pieces. So keep an eye on women's basketball. We'll keep it posted. Again, we'll put more information out about the podcast with wrestling coach Tony Roby on Wednesday. Looking forward to having him. But until then, that's going to do it. Any parting thoughts before we sign off?
None whatsoever. Let's get to work.
All right. Make sure to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all at Tech Sideline. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We always appreciate that. And I hope you can join us again for the next edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. That'll do it for our normal crew today. For Malcolm Stewart, the best producer in the land behind the scenes on the podcast set, our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart. I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. Thanks so long. Thanks so much for watching. This has been the Tech Sideline Podcast presented by the Fisher Law Firm.